All right, Hotep, everybody. Good to see you. Okay, thank you very much. Um, it is always good to see you and to have you here. And we always praise in the name of our ancestors, them for giving us the opportunity to build on the foundations and the platforms that they have made. Because if it were not for them, we would not be here. I want to make two announcements. We normally don't like to make announcements because we want the program to be recorded as a whole program, but for our organizations that we sort of see as sibling organizations like the Afrocentricity International, we always want to promote them. So they're having on August the 8th, please write this down, on August the 8th through the 9th, they're having an RBG centennial. And this is going to be all, of course, in celebration of Marcus Garvey and the UNIA. You can go to the Eventbrite and register. You just go online, go to Eventbrite, register for the conference. Brother Omawali and Brother Lazmi of Afrocentricity International have put together a very profound program. And we hope that those of you who are listening to us will be there. And the reason we're saying this is because we're going to be off, MKAI will be off the air now until till August the 23rd. August 23rd, we'll come back on the air with our fall program. And I will be giving the first fall lecture on August the 23rd. You should also take that number down, the ID number, because we'll send out announcements, but we also need to have you have the number ahead of time, those of you who don't necessarily get our mailings. The ID number for August the 23rd at 4 o'clock on Classical African Civilizations will be 925 8884 6677. 925 8884 6677. That's the lecture I will be giving on August the 23rd at 4 o'clock. We will not have sessions in between that time. We're going to urge people to go to the RBG Centennial on August the 8th and 9th and register through Eventbrite. Okay, let me just tell you a story about some events because we're living in a rather mad time, and there are a lot of things going on, and I just want us to be clear. In April 1998, there was a farewell celebration for one of my good friends, and actually somebody that I had known since we were quite young, or at least we were activists in organizations. And that was a farewell celebration for Kwame Ture. We had the celebration in April in Washington, and he passed away in November. It was held in Washington at the Marriott, and most of the old SNCC people came, but there were leaders from various other sectors of society, including ambassadors from Africa and the Caribbean. And as a chapter leader at UCLA of SNCC, I became the president of SNCC at UCLA about the time that, at that time we used to say Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture became the leader of SNCC nationally. And then, of course, when he left the presidency, the chairmanship, then we went to H. Rap Brown. So at any rate, at this meeting in April of 1998, um, it was interesting because people came in blazing colors and with great words for the magnificent Kwame Ture, who was, of course, resplendent as always. Even in his illness, you could tell that he was a presence and that his presence would even last longer than he lasted physically. And so, as a peacemaker, this was what I'm going to tell you. As a peacemaker that night, as we were jam packed into the ballroom, he took the microphone at a certain point after people had given him all the national leaders. Marion Barry was there, of course, who had been the mayor of Washington, D.C. John Lewis, who had been the president of SNCC just before Kwame Ture took the presidency, was there. And so, as a peacemaker, uh, Kwame Ture took the microphone and asked that Julian Bond and John Lewis and Louis Farrakhan reset their relationship. There had been over the years certain tensions between them. And they seem to have waited. Some people say they waited till after midnight, till after all of the big NBC, CBS at that time, ABC News people had left. And C-SPAN was the only television there. There was a cable news channel there. And so when Kwame did this, we were all, I mean, you know, in a situation like this, you don't know what's going to happen. But John Lewis, noble as he always was, got up. They were all sitting on the dais because they were all, of course, contemporaries of Kwame Ture in many ways. And not only contemporaries, but they were civil rights leaders. But John Lewis got up out of his seat and went over and embraced Farrakhan. The audience went crazy. The applause, the absolute sense of the possibilities of unity among brothers. And it's interesting because the way Kwame put it, and Kwame Ture was always international in his outlook and his understanding. He says, well, you know, Hamas sits down with Fatah. These are two Palestinian organizations. They don't always agree, but they sit down and talk with each other. Why is it that as African Americans, we cannot sit down and talk decently with each other? Why must it be even sometimes through insults? And this was one of the great lessons of all times. It's one of the lessons that I learned myself just watching that, because as a victim many times of insults, I have always understood precisely why it is important to have a concept of harmony and the possibilities, you see, of what we can do and what people can do if they only sit down and have a decent conversation without name calling. The name calling tradition is a part of the Trump world. And that's part of the world where you don't have an argument, but you can say anything about anybody. You can call them anything, do anything. And there's no reason for them, if they don't have the same unethical principles, to say anything to you. And that basically goes without saying normally in any discussion or argument. But John Lewis taught a lesson. The boy from Troy, who had joined the movement at 17, demonstrated a very strong sense of what was beautiful and what was possible. And of course, Kwame Ture rejoiced in bringing together of these foes who at least who had seemed to have been foes. And the media, of course, does a lot to try to make sure that they would get conflict. Media is rarely about information. The media is always about conflict because conflict is entertaining. And people who follow the media know that the principal aim, the whole idea behind what the media does many times is to figure out how they can get the biggest arguments and how they can get people engaged or involved in various kinds of debates and that kind of thing. So that was basically part of the lesson of the SNCC movement, because SNCC, of course, had many of us who were people from all different aspects of life. And we came from various organizations into the realm of SNCC. And it was the spirit of, always the spirit, it seemed to me, of Kwame Ture to bring people together. And when he brought John Lewis and Julian Bond and Farrakhan together, and he had a sense that they needed to be together, I was very, very much a part of a historical moment. And it's that historical moment that I think shows us that we African American people are in the crosshairs of history. I want to just applaud and thank Dr. Adisa Al-Kibolan. I see Michael Cord and a lot of you who are here, people I've known for many years who have come to this lecture. This is, I announced earlier, this is the last lecture until October the 23rd. We all need a break. I mean, we've been in sheltering in because of COVID, but even that means sometimes we just need a break. So on August the 23rd at 4 o'clock, I will be lecturing on classical African civilizations, and the ID number for that lecture is going to be 925 884 6677. 925 8884 6677. And I want to welcome Dr. Segun Shabaka, because he will be one of our speakers in the fall as well. Welcome him here. I'm just trying to see, there's so many of you and so many great people. I'm just really happy to have all of you here. So I'm ready to begin this conversation. Let me just start by saying something which you already know. And I'm talking now to the people from South Africa and the people from UK and from France who are here, who may not know this, but this is good for them. That the African American, in a real sense, occupies a unique position historically, and that's because we are a combination of all of Africa. So sometimes when people say African American, they don't realize that more than 150 African ethnic groups were brought from the continent of Africa to the Americas. And those 150 African ethnic groups actually became a part of each other. And not only became a part of each other, but became a part of the European history and the Native American history of the United States. So we are a multi-ethnic population from the very beginning, but not only a multi-ethnic population from Africa at that moment, but also in terms of recent years. In the last 60, 70 years, there have been new populations of people from the continent, whether they're from Nigeria or Ethiopia or Sierra Leone or Ghana, South Africa. The pool, the African American pool, has been enriched by people from Jamaica and people from Trinidad and Haiti and Cuba and Puerto Rico and Colombia and Brazil, Africans from Brazil. So we have this incredible energy this incredible African energy with the deep cultural references to the African continent. The very spiritual basis of our lives are really found on the fact that we are devoted to basic humanity. And our sages have always seen this as the fundamental construct for harmony in the world. And our parents, our ancestors taught us this whole notion of how we need to understand each other and understand the world. I like what Maulana Karenga, the great philosopher, often says, that the notion of Saruj Ta, which was that you build something back greater and better than it was, that you restore the land, you repair the land. And this is the concept that he says came out of the overflowing of the Nile River. And when it overflowed and you wanted to have to restore the farms of people, give them the land that they had before the flood, or restore buildings, you had to, this was called Saruj Ta. You had to repair the land. And it was a big job to do this. And it was a concept that is very essential to justice. What is the meaning of justice, you see? Africans gave this concept. I always say that Africans gave many of the basic concepts. Of course, that should only be natural, since for most of the life of Homo sapiens, we lived on the continent of Africa. Homo sapiens did not leave the continent of Africa until about 70,000 years ago. So Homo sapiens, of the 300,000 years that we have had humanity, most of the time, humanity lived in Africa. So it's sort of like a no-brainer. These were the first people who had some notion of what would kill you if you ate it, what was edible and what was not, what water was potable and what was not, what was potable and what was not, what would be poisonous. These were the people who came up with the names of children and named their children and named the stars. The first people that did this were Africans, had to be, nobody else. So the concept of justice, I always think about that because it's almost like freedom when you talk about the concept of freedom. I mean, in the United States of America, people talk about freedom, this, freedom, that, but there is no mention of freedom in the Constitution. There is free speech, and there is, nobody should stop you from your religion. But the concept of freedom was not a concept that was ingrained in the European experience. And that's why they talked so much about liberty, which carried with it something that was much more material. But the idea of freedom, that was something that the Africans gave to the American society because we understood bondage and we understood the fact that we had been restricted and restrained, and so we were always fighting and singing and preaching and talking about freedom. I just want to talk just a little bit today about principles of what I call control of thought. And those of you who know something about Kemet, you will probably have heard that term before. But control of thought, because I think that our task as African Americans and Africans in the diaspora and Africans on the continent, and especially Africans on the continent, our task is to unmask the vile, vicious reality of what has happened to us historically. Not to excuse madness, but to confront madness with rational and careful action and organization. From the inception of our campaign for liberation from the clutches of enslavement and degradation and colonialism, we have always been on this journey. I always tell people that really, the great heroes, and we don't have enough um, memorials to our greatest heroes. But the great heroes, the Maroons in Haiti, and in Brazil and Florida and South Carolina and Jamaica, the revolutionaries in Haiti, they're not enough. I mean, you think about it. I mean, if you had in the European world a leader as brilliant as a strategist as Dessalines, then Dessalines would be everywhere. But why is it that we have not seen Dessalines in the light of his incredible military success when he defeated the most powerful army of the day, Leclerc's army, Leclerc coming to represent Napoleon in Haiti? Dessalines defeated him. Well, why is it that our children in America, black children, go to school, they never heard the name Dessalines? How can that be? It's because we have not unmasked the lies that have been told about our people. And we got to do this. We got to do it constantly. It's a job. You wake up in the morning, you do it. I wake up every day, I think about it. How can you best strategize? I really do. I seriously think about it. To me, it is the only thing that will save our people from the madness that we are in. And when we see it, when people see Trump, the way that we can make our analysis of him is because we know history. I mean, people now are saying about how crazy Trump is, but we know that Europeans have been crazy in this land for a long time. I mean, how do you lynch people and then laugh about it? How do you cut off their sexual organs and put them in jars and preserve them so your children can see it and not be crazy and mad? How do you do this? How do you force little black girls to sleep on the feet of old white men in their beds to keep them warm and not be considered crazy? No, we know this. We know this experience. And part of being in the crosshairs is because we understand what has happened from the very inception of us being in these clutches. So I give honor and I give praise to Dessalines, to Christophe, and certainly to the great leader Louverture. You have to give them credit. You have to praise them all the time. You have to praise Nanny of Jamaica. Who was any more courageous than this Akan queen who stopped the British in their tracks and made a maroon empire in the middle of Jamaica? Nanny of Jamaica. Where is she? Where is her statue? It was only recently in Jamaica, maybe 30 years ago, that they even had a statue of Marcus Garvey. He said, where is Garvey? Marcus Garvey. Why can't? Where is the recognition of Garvey? And it's very fascinating to me that we have always avoided honoring the people who gave their lives for us and fought for us. Where is Nat Turner? Show me, where's the school named after Nat Turner? Even the school where the school district and the school board is black. Where's the Nat Turner School? President Trump is arguing about Confederates, people who fought against the United States government, rebels against the United States government. He's mad because some of their statues are being taken down. But where is the statue to Harriet Tubman? There are a few. I mean, certainly there are a few. I've seen 2 of Harriet Tubman, but that's not enough, given the 45 million Africans who live in this country. I mean, this is the greatest person who's ever lived in America. I don't know anybody greater than Harriet Tubman. I can't think of one. I don't think of Lincoln as great as she is. I don't know any African person that I would put ahead of Harriet Tubman. Why? Why? Because when she did what she did in the 19th century, in the middle of the enslavement. What she did was basically to catch the system by its economic guts and wrench it away from them. You're going to sell African people and make African people your material wealth? I'll steal them. I'll take them away. And on one occasion, she was able to release 700 black people to freedom at one time. Nobody, no, nobody greater than Harriet Tubman. No, and even after when the war was over and they began to try to recognize her, some people didn't want to give her a pension, but she had they gave her a pension because after all she had been a spy for the Union. But before she was a spy for a Union, this brilliant woman was the greatest strategist for the liberation of black people in a concrete way that we had ever had. So I talk about these people and I honor them because it was our people who sought freedom from this notion of bondage that we had been used to. And I want to just say that we right now, and for all of you everywhere, I mean, and I say this because I know our audience is international, that the United States is in a very big mess. And, and in fact, there is nothing that I can say that would even be close to what the reality is, given the fact that what we've been saying is that we African people in the United States are the ones who have given America its soul. And we are the ones who have given its moral and ethical standards of human rights, because what we have seen are the worst offenders of the worst of humanity. You see, and I've always mentioned this, and one of you with a Native American ancestor wrote to me about this. I've always said that the problem of evil in the United States starts with the inception of the country. The genocide of the native peoples and the enslavement of the Africans. These are two crimes at the very center of this experiment. And until these two crimes are acknowledged and until they are dealt with, the evil that eats out the political soul of the country cannot be obliterated. It would still be there. And every time we talk, we will understand this. And I'm saying all of this because I also saw last night what was happening in Portland, Oregon. And the impression that has been given in this country is that the arrest of ordinary citizens by police that have been federalized or under the power of central government can only happen in what they call non-democratic states. But two of the most notable examples are from Germany, and which was a democratic state when Hitler rose to power, and now the United States under Trump, where Trump, of course, uses these federalized officers with no insignia. You can't even tell, you can't look at their clothes to tell whether they're from the Marines, the Army, Homeland Security, or Blackwater. And I say Blackwater. Now, I know Blackwater has changed its name, but Blackwater, you know, was infamous because Blackwater was that organization that did what they used to call extraction. They would pick up people anywhere in the world and then would fly them to Guantanamo. This was, and be paid for, be paid. This was a private organization. In fact, Vice President Cheney of past days had been involved with that organization. And I think he had been one of the founders of the organization. They did the dirty work for the American military, you see. So in the United States, in Portland, Oregon, you got people last night arrested in unmarked cars, you know, without insignias on their uniforms. Sort of no-knock policy. I pick you up. And then having neighbors turn into informers. If this is not like a dictatorship or an autocratic government, then what is? So we've got to really watch this and be vigilant. And we've got to vote too. Look at this. The founder of Blackwater was a guy named Eric Prince. You may not know of him, may not have heard of him, but his sister is Betty DeVos. She is the lady in charge of education in America. So Betty DeVos and her brother Eric Prince comes out of this dystopian Republican corner of some aspect of the negativity of the American society. And what they have done, what Prince has now done, he's hiring and recruiting ex-spies to infiltrate what they consider to be progressive groups, whether they're uh, Democratic campaigns or unions or organizations of African Americans. And we have to watch it. Even our progressive organizations have to watch it. I'm pretty sure a few years ago that we had some experiences with AI. We had to watch it. We had to be very careful. And we were fortunate that we were careful enough to recognize what was going on. But you've got to be careful because this is the way that, when people are looking for ways to undermine freedom and free expression and liberty, this is what happens. So Native American brother wrote to me recently and he said, he said, Dr. Asante, do you know why you don't know too many Native American names? And I thought about it. Yeah, like I don't know too many people with Cherokee names or Iroquois names or Apache names or Lakota names or Dene names or Shawnee names or Muskogee names. Very few. He said, no, they give them European names. They give us European names. He said most of them in the Southwest, they give Spanish names, but we're not Spanish. He said, in the United States, when they put us on reservations, you know what they do? Our names disappear and they give us federal ID numbers. So we just like prisoners. They give us a number. Look, you're talking about sinister? This is part of the madness. So the native peoples, the idea not just strip them of their sacred lands, but strip them of all of their dignity. And this, to me, as an African person, really touches me because I know that the destruction that happened to us was supposed to be total, almost like they did to the original people of Australia and the original people of this land, to sort of decimate the whole people and then take the land, not only take the land, but then, as John Henry Clark used to like to say, they not only destroyed the people, colonized the land, but then they wrote the history of what they had done to tell you who these people were and why they had to do it. This is part of the madness of the educational system that we have. And we never should forget that the great General Sherman, and I call him great general only because in the American text, we call him General Sherman. They named a tank after him. He was the guy who went from Atlanta down to Savannah with his army during the battle against the Confederacy and destroyed all the farms and all the places that he saw in the Confederacy and everything. They named a tank after him, the Sherman tank. Well, what did Sherman do? Sherman went after the war to the West, and his job was to kill all of the buffalo. Why? To starve the native peoples to death because their lives depended on the buffalo. Just like in certain parts of Africa, we depend on the baobab tree. It has everything. It has food. It has medicine. And just like that, we recognize that the killing of the buffalo was a way to starve the native people. They didn't even have clothes to wear because they used the fur of the buffalo, you see. And so what did they do? The American government gave them blankets. You can see, if you go to the reservation, you'll get blankets. And then they put smallpox in the blankets, and the people died massively out of smallpox. Who would think of that? Well, you know who would think of it. You got a president now with everybody says he has no empathy. you so if you can see people, children in cages, locked up in cages like animals, and your heart does not bleed, then obviously you can do anything. We are Africans in the crosshairs of history. And to honor our ancestors, their strength, their courage that came at least in these continents, America, North and South America, where we had to dig the copper and the gold from the mines in South America and work in the hot sugarcane fields and cotton fields and tobacco fields to make an agricultural giant out of the American nations, and to cut down the trees and the forests to build the cities, and to fight in the cold trenches of war for these countries. We understand often that sometimes when we were fighting, and I had two uncles, for example, who fought for the American nation, and they would come back and say that the real enemy was right at home in Georgia. You see, so those are things that we have to remember in terms of being in these crosshairs. I want to say a few more things, and then I really haven't got to my main points, but I will get there. I wanted to say a little bit because I made a note to myself. I need to talk about George Floyd killing and the national conversation about reparations, because you probably read the story that in Asheville, North Carolina, the city council voted unanimously to provide reparations to the black people in Asheville. This seems to be, on the surface, one of the most progressive moves that I've seen in the United States. They're going to fund programs aimed at increasing home ownership, provide career opportunities and wealth building for black residents, and they're going to do all that. And Providence, Rhode Island, and the state of California have also recently signaled that they're open to reparations. But there really should be a national response, and that's what N'COBRA has been fighting for. So we've got to move toward a national response and get rid of these reactions based on white privilege wherever they are. The real truth of the matter is that without the 246 years of basically free labor that the African people gave to the United States of America, the United States of America would be just like any other ordinary country in terms of wealth. But the giant wealth, the billions of dollars that some of these people have, that wealth was based on the backs of African men and women who worked to, think about it, when you can have labor, you don't have to pay anything. 246 years of it for free from millions of people. Yeah, you would be a great country. You choose a country and take 4 million people, 4.5 million when the end came. 4.5 million, put them to work. And they have no say over how long you could work them. They have no say over their own bodies. They have no say over their own leisure time. So this is the important thing for us to remember. And I just want to talk about just a few principles that I wish that we as a people, nationally and internationally, could subscribe to, which I think would be very, very wonderful for us and very wonderful for the world. The first principle is what I call, we need to fight the attempt to rob Africans of their history. See, our enemies want a false view of Africa as savage, primitive, wild, and incapable of sustaining itself. That's the view they want. You got to fight that. Even if you are somebody who's never been to school, and you hear somebody say something like that, I'm telling you, just reject it. You just know that it cannot be true. And this is the way, I don't know how it happened, but for me, growing up in Georgia, I almost, from the time that have had any sense of consciousness, I remember rejecting all negativity about African people. I didn't know African people were more negative than Europeans. I could not assume that. Who could be any more primitive than the white people who mistreated us, who mistreated Mary Turner, my niece's great great grandmother. I mean, who could be any worse than these people? No, we have to fight the attempt to rob Africans of their history. And that has been done over and over again. And part of it is, as Clark said, when they colonized, they also colonized the history. They wrote the story. They told us who Nehanda was. They told us who Shaka was. You got black people walking around saying, Shaka was a bloody crazy man. They don't even have no Afrocentric understanding of Shaka's attempt to prepare people to deal with the white invasions of Southern Africa. They don't have no attempt. They don't understand that. And so we have got to rebuild our history and rebuild an understanding of our history. That's why you have people thinking that Africans did not resist the enslavement. Some people say, well, Africans didn't resist their enslavement. But I have found in my book, The History of Africa, I found that there must have been over 300 serious attempts of black armies to fight against the enslavers on the coast of Africa, you see. And some of these stories are hidden. You have to dig deep to find, sometimes they're in myths. Sometimes they're in stories told by the drummers. It's a very deep story. Some of them have been hidden from us because not only did we not want to remember, and we didn't want to remember sometimes because we were frightened about what white people do to us. We remember the names of the ones who were so outstanding in their victories, you see. Number two, another principle. Always master information about the achievements of Africans everywhere. Refer to testimony of anyone of us Africans, wherever we are, to disprove the lies of Europeans about Africans or Arabs about Africans. You accept all African history. This is the way I live my life. I try to do that. I tell people I accept all African history. You can't tell me that that there's only one part of African history since I'm in the United States, that I can only refer to Africans in the United States. Come on, the world of Africa is mine. I mean, and I have always enjoyed the idea of learning the information about Africa. In fact, the information about one ethnic community in Africa is a university in and of itself. If you just spent your time studying Yoruba culture and philosophy, Yoruba medicine, Yoruba agriculture, you got a university. If you studied Igbo philosophy, Igbo understanding of archaeology, just Igbo architecture, you got a university. Look at all these universities. There are over 3,500 different languages in Africa. All of them are universities. And then there are the ones that we will never know because during the enslavement, they were totally destroyed. All of their people were taken into captivity and they're all gone now. And they have languages that will never be heard and music that we will never hear and dances that we will never see. This is our inheritance, you see. So always master information about the achievements of Africans everywhere. When I'm in Australia, and I'm talking to the Australians at university or wherever I'm talking, the Australians, they refer to the British writers. Shakespeare is one of the greatest writers. I'm saying they're in Australia, but they wherever they are, they still have an academy. I think I gave a talk already on the Pan-European Academy, how wide it is and how deep it is, you see. So that's principle two. Principle three, be aware of the attempt to take ancient Egyptians out of Africa and then to take black people out of Egypt. that 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 is constant, and this is one of the things Sheikh Anta Diop talked about many times. You got to be aware of this attempt, and it happens every day. You turn the TV on, and there's some TV documentary, you know, some newspaper article, some history manual, a website, and on and on and on that's trying to take Egypt out of Africa. Egypt cannot be taken out of Africa. It is directly on the continent of Africa. It is not on the continent of Asia. It is not in Arabia. It is not, in Arabia, of course, is not a continent. It's a subcontinent, but it's not in Arabia. It is not in Europe. It's not in America. Egypt is a country that's in Africa. And the original people of Egypt, the ancient Egyptians, were black people. There's no argument about that. And the thing is, they want you to continue to argue about it. You just have to be aware of the attempt for them to take ancient Egypt. And I'm saying this because, first of all, not only do I have many friends from Egypt, one of my godsons is Abdulmalik, who's from Egypt, a black Egyptian, right? So I mean, look, the people who have taught me, some of the people who taught me, were the Egyptians themselves, the black Egyptians in Elephantine. Mustafa Hefni, one of the great thinkers about this, lives in the United States of America and has fought this issue for a long time. The Arab conquest of Egypt is something that occurred in the 7th century, this era. That's, for many of you out of the church, it's 639 AD. This era. Not before Christ. Before Christ, all the people in Egypt were black. This is after. This is 639 years after Jesus Christ. Then you get the Arabs coming in to Egypt en masse. They had been there, few of them before, and there had been Greeks there and some Assyrians and so on. But the country was a black country. And so you still got remnants of these people. They're still there. But the Arabs don't let you see them. And if you talk to the Arabs about the black Egyptians, they'll act like they don't know what you're talking about. When you see them everywhere you go, particularly in Upper Egypt, which is the South. Upper Egypt is the South. So just remember that. You know, it's because the river Nile runs down to the Mediterranean. So you have to get that kind of understanding. So many non-Africans have recognized the African origin of civilization. I mean, Count Volney recognized it in his book, Ruins of Empire. And the thing is that they try to, the Europeans would try to ridicule any African who stands up for African culture. They'll even trot out their preachers, deeply indebted to their religions, whatever those religions happen to be, preachers or imams, to fight against black culture. This is the craziest thing. But they got black people. They just tell you stand up here and tell them that Christianity is this or that Islam is this. And the black person stands up there and tells you. And they don't even know anything about Africa. I always tell the story about the Jehovah's Witnesses who came to my house. And I said, okay, well, you want me to read the Watchtower? But tell me, what do you know about Zulu culture? They said nothing. I said, well, what do you know about Wolof culture? Nothing. What do you know about Yoruba culture? Nothing. What do you know about Ewe culture? Nothing. What do you know about Asante culture? Nothing. Then what are you going to bring me some book by a white guy called Watchtower, and you know nothing about yourself? Did you see how silly that is? I said, oh no, we can't have a conversation. You go back, read something about Africa, then you come back and tell me comparatively why you think that this is better than what you have. This is because enslavement of Africans was not just physical, it was like it was for the Native Americans, psychological. And the attempt was to destroy us from thinking freely forever. Principle 4, don't allow people to get away with changing dates, changing names, changing African statues or frescoes to obliterate African people. You must protect and project African artifacts for our own learning. I mean, about Africa, because it's a way we learn about ourselves. And it's also a way that, in a sense, we put our culture and values on the table of humanity. Otherwise, what are we sharing? If we have nothing to share on the table of humanity but a rehashed Eurocentricity or Arabocentricity, what do you have? And that's what I sometimes ask the brothers and sisters, particularly the brothers and sisters who are deep into these religions. Say, okay, so if you take that away, take that away, take that away, what do you have as an African? What do you give the world? And they can't think of anything. They don't know anything. Because everybody else got it, but they don't have it. And they don't know that they are the richest. They don't know, they have no concept of how rich they are. And that was the intent. If we knew about Inyanga Nzala, the great empire of Mpumalanga, where you go see the Mpumalanga ruins like I did last year, you go up and you see these ruins that are from 100,000 years ago, much more ancient than Stonehenge. Stones in the ground that our ancestors built for rituals and spiritual actions in Mpumalanga. Remember that. You go to Mpumalanga, you can fly there from Johannesburg. It takes about an hour. You go over and you get a guide, they take you up there. And you say, wow, the most beautiful thing. And they're up in this beautiful area, through this beautiful forest, up in this mountain. Africans built there 100,000 years ago. There are no Europeans 100,000 years ago. There are no Greeks 100,000 years ago. No Romans. No Americans. 100,000 years ago. So do not allow people to get away with changing history. That's the worst thing that could happen, because they want to obliterate Africa and obliterate Africans in the process. Number 5, principle 5, continue your critical studies of the field of anthropology and any other Eurocentric science, because anthropology, I know, sits at the head of racist science, because the way they started anthropology was to be able to try to figure out how other people compared to white people, or how white people were superior to other people. That's why anthropology comes about. It's not coming about to bring the world together. It's coming about to show white people that, look, you are superior to these people. Your head is bigger. This is this, and so on. That's a twisted science, you see. But study it, understand it, and then see how they have tried to argue that Mesopotamia, they don't like to say Iraq, but Mesopotamia was before Kemet, before Egypt. So that's the story. Mesopotamia is now Iraq, right? So they said that writing, well, we don't know whether writing started first in Kemet or writing started first in Mesopotamia. That's what they would tell you. But here's the thing. If you look at writing in Kemet, And particularly for 1,000 years after writing is supposed to have started around 3300 BC, before the Christian era, you will discover that there is nothing of significance in Mesopotamia before 1500 BC. And that is the Epic of Gilgamesh. But before that, Africa had given us historical records and narratives, philosophy, poetry, medicine, diagnosis, incredible mythical stories out of the spiritual world. It's given us that thing. So don't allow people just to say things, because they will do that. Because what is the aim of Europe? The aim of Europe has always been to deny Africa its place in the sun. And you as a person of intelligence and understanding and a sense of respect for what is true and accurate must understand that the enslavement of Africans and the colonization of Africa were not natural. They were accidents of human history. And these accidents of human history cannot be allowed to define African history or African culture. We have to understand that the invention of writing, the invention of mathematics, the invention of astronomy, the invention of medicine, and the invention of geometry were African inventions. We couldn't build the pyramids without geometry. We had to have it. And that was, the pyramids were built long before Jesus ever existed, long before Muhammad came into the world, and long before Socrates and Plato existed. So, principle 6, we've got to assert the truth of historical documents that show Africa has a rich history in trade, commerce, communication, culture. And so it's not just in one area. It's in all areas we have African knowledge. So almost, you can almost say whatever the knowledge is, well, Africa's done something there. So if people say, oh, well, we're talking about astronomy. Oh, yeah, well, Africa did something about astronomy. Well, we talk about medicine. Well, the first medical diagnoses were African. We're talking about mathematics. Well, the first mathematics book was the Rhind Papyrus, which is African. And so you have this. But here's what I'm going to suggest to you. Those of you who don't have these books, I'm going to give you a list of books, and I'm going to just give them quickly so you can go through what you got and see what's there. If you don't have my book called The History of Africa, you get Asante's book, The History of Africa. The History of Africa. There's a third edition. I've done it 3 times. I've enlarged it, expanded it, and I'm working on the 4th edition, because you can't write the history of Africa in one book. So it's going to eventually, hopefully, be a massive book, but it is already a big book, The History of Africa. Go get that book. You have to have it. It's the first time that a Black person has written a comprehensive history of Africa. The only other example that's similar to it is the one by one of my mentors, Joseph Kizerbo. Joseph Kizerbo, his book is called The History of Sub-Saharan Africa. So the only comprehensive book on the history of Africa written by an African, as far as I know, at least up to now, is the one that I wrote. Now, did anybody ever write the history of Africa? Yeah, Europeans. There's several books called The History of Africa or A History of Africa by Europeans. And in fact, the book that my book replaced with the Routledge Publishing House is a book that had been written and had lasted for 40 years as the standard book of the history of Africa by a man named Fage, F-A-G-G. And Fage book, or F-A-G-E, and Fage's book had been around. It was a racist book about the history of Africa. So I told Routledge, look, no, I have to write a book. I have to write a book that will show that Fage's book was such an erroneous look at the history of Africa. And so they said, okay, and that's why we wrote. I wrote The History of Africa. Third edition was out last year, and now I'm already collecting stuff that I didn't know existed. I'm telling you, if you read that book, you will discover that there are pyramid type structures in Central African Republic. I didn't know that. You read that book and you know the names of the revolutionaries that revolted against the Belgians when King Leopold thought he controlled through Henry Stanley the Congo. You read the Congolese who led guerrilla warfare, first guerrilla warfares against. And of course, you will see the incredible madness of Europe when they shot down 50,000 Herero people in Namibia in one day with a Gatling machine gun. But I'm just saying to you that you got to know, just know your history. Read. If you get the history of Africa, I guarantee you, if you read it and you study it and you reread it, you don't need anything else. You are ready. You are able to do things and to be really important. So, okay, read that. Read Asante's The Afrocentric Manifesto. Read Karinga's Introduction to Black Studies. Read Ani's Yurugu. Williams, Chancellor Williams, The Destruction of Black Civilization. I'm going fast. I'm going to quit soon. Read Dove's African Mothers. Read Woodson's Stolen Legacy. Read Van Sertima's They Came Before Columbus. Read Sheikh Anta Diop's The African Origin of Civilization. I go through those quickly one more time. Asante's The History of Africa. Asante's The Afrocentric Manifesto. Karenga's Introduction to Black Studies. Marima Ani's Yurugu, Y-U-R-U-G-U. Williams's The Destruction of Black Civilization. Dove, The African Mothers. Woodson, Stolen Legacy. Van Sertima, They Came Before Columbus. Diop, The African Origin of Civilization. You can go to Google or Amazon and download information about any of those books. Now, Principle 7, convey information about all humanity, not just Europe. Mention the works of African researchers and specialists. When you're talking to people, know enough about African scholars, even if you only know like Sheikh Anta Diop, just say Sheikh Anta Diop. You can say Sheikh Anta Diop or Theophilo Benga or Wade Novus or Asa Hilliard or Marimba Ani. And that's enough to, give you some time to go do some more research. Just because those scholars have dealt with almost everything, right? You just give them those names, or if they're talking about values or religion, give them Karenga's Ma'at, the moral ideal in ancient Egypt. They would be out of their depth. And you do that because that's what people try to do to you. They try to give you names and concepts that, what about this concept? No. You say, what about Ma'at? That is so read, know your stuff, right? Principle 8, fight for a Pan-African consciousness. Never a national, ethnic, or provincial Africanity. Always remember, Africa belongs to Africans. If it is a cultural energy, this is not a ranking of heritages, but of cultures, but a heritage of people. Embrace the heritage. Rid yourself of the love of others before yourself, and you will make yourself a better person. Number 9, Principle 9, use the work of our giants for your scholarship. Don't just go out there on on the edge, and don't just get one idea from somebody and run with it. Be a serious student. That's what I guess. If I have a complaint sometimes about some of our people, is that they're not serious scholars. They're just what I call dilettantes. You know what I mean? Do a serious analysis. Do serious study. Know what you're talking about. and use the work of scholarship. You read Job 3 times if necessary. Read Karinga or Chinwezu or Asa Hilliard. Read them 3 or 4 times to really get to know what they're talking about. And so then you can discuss with the giants of any academy. And then number 10, destroy any hierarchical idea that promotes the idea that Europeans are superior to anybody else in the world. You got to destroy that. Know something about some of the world knowledge. Know something about uh, Timbuktu, Sankore. Know something about the Memphite theology, the Shabaka stone. Know something about China, India, Aztec civilization to defeat the idea of a white racial ladder where white people see themselves at the top. My brothers and my sisters, I'm going to, there's so many more things to say and to do, but I want to tell you that this has been great, marvelous. I have appreciated deeply all the work that you have done, and I want you to continue to do it. And remember, we will be back here on August the 23rd, in which I talk about classical Africa. Probably will add some more civilizations to classical Africa that we haven't discussed before. Because sometimes we deal with Kemet, Nubia, Aksum, Ghana, Mali, and Shanghai. But I may say something about Congo and Monomotapa as well, because those are also civilizations that are incredibly important. And I just want to say I appreciate all of you for hanging in here, and certainly again to see Sister Dr. Nzinga and to congratulate her at Cheney University for moving on with the Africana Studies program. I'll see you guys on the 23rd. Peace and power.